So for the February 27th, 2026 OpenStack Ops Radio Hour meeting, the recording is now running. So Chris, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Okay, thank you, Ildiko. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome back. I guess we've done quite a few of these now. So I hope you can all see the Etherpad. That's the rough agenda. We don't have like a rigid structure. So if people want to call out and add topics, they can write them there. Well, we do have kind of a special guest. So last month there were questions to me about how do you run OpenStack in a high availability mode. And I started to answer the questions thinking I really wish I could just ask Tyler, who's really our technical lead on our private cloud product, which is based on OpenStack. And I said, could you just join the next meeting? And he said, sure. So he's actually joined. So Tyler's been instrumental in building this to a key platform for Bloomberg and has presented at OpenStack or Open Infra conferences in Berlin and has upstream contributions. So he knows his stuff better than I do these days. So he's here. If any of the people who had questions last time are here, they can ask, or we can just, discuss HA architectures in general. We run a mix of architecture, so we don't have one giant cloud that must be up all the time. We have between 10 and 20 instances, but each of those is also getting large these days and has enough scale to be a scaling problem and also enough business logic dependent on it that if it's down, it's a major outage. So the HA aspect of it, the control plane, is a very important thing that we put a lot of effort in. We have most of the key services clustered or in HA mode, database, load balancer, message bus, storage control plane, etc. So are there any specific questions on how we do all that Tyler might be able to comment on? So in case anyone is new to this, this is actually supposed to be a working session. This is not a presentation, so if no one speaks, it's going to be very short. So please do actually participate. It's not a slideshow, right? You're tuning in to actually talk about the work we do. So really need people to actually talk rather than just sit there. Right now I've got only one person on video, no one speaking, so it makes it impossible to get anything out of this. So don't be shy.
There are still people joining, it seems, at least in the past minute or so. And based on the survey, HA and HA configurations is one of the topic areas that people are curious about. I'm not sure if everyone is ready to ask questions. Maybe some folks are new and trying to figure out how to do HA in the first place. I don't know if you all could maybe share some good practices that you had good experience with, or some things that you ran into and you had to resolve, or any challenges in terms of how to operate OpenStack in high availability configurations that you think would be great for people out there to see, because there will also be people who will be watching the meeting recording on YouTube. And so if there's any lessons that you learned, good or bad, um, and you don't mind sharing, that would be, I think, very useful for folks
I mean,
on the
sure,
call.
we can talk about some lessons learned. I think we are deep enough in that we've made some mistakes and then recovered from them. One of the things we had when we first started our current product was we had skew between the different deployments. So we had 2 or 3 clusters, and they were initiated at a slightly different time. So they ended up with a different version of the distro, different version of the Linux kernel, and slightly different versions of OpenStack. And it was kind of a pain, but we could deal with it. But as you get to approaching a different order of magnitude, it's unsustainable. So what we did was we actually got to a point where we converged the exact software version of all of the deployments to one release, as we call it, And we also stopped making local changes to machines in the vast majority of cases. So there's in the production fleet, there's no machines where the Nova configuration is slightly different because we had a different workload and we really wanted to just do a special favor locally. Um, we we treat it as infrastructure as code. So if we need to do a feature, it has to either be universal or we have to have toggles in the metadata for a particular installation. Um, but the code is universal. So when we do testing, it's actually representative because we have hardware test clusters. They're small, but the key point is that actually puts some mileage on the configuration that we use in production. It's not one of many or close, it's actually the same. It's exactly the same. The main differences we see are test clusters, and you can't afford to have them at the same scale as your production installation. So problems of scaling are harder to spot. But of course, we can do things like impose a punishing load and push things to their limit, like maybe make queues grow, make memory under pressure, make storage slower, those kinds of things. And I think to a large extent, that's allowed us to scale to, as I said, between 10 and 20 production installations um, without a growing amount of you know uh, local changes and local pain and local divergence and inscrutable bugs because this cluster is different from that cluster. We can often debug our problems on the test cluster and then deploy the fix to the production cluster, and it's effective. Um, does anyone want to speak about how the problem of skew that they've had? Is anyone actually running more than one installation and they're different? Uh, I see a Fungi would like to participate. Does that mean you want to speak? I don't use this other than monthly. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of experience operating OpenStack Cloud, surprisingly, but as a user, we see a lot of challenges related to version skew between different versions of OpenStack, just because we run a lot of cross cloud workloads, and being able to have one single client that works with you know a dozen different versions and vintages of OpenStack APIs out in the wild and public clouds becomes challenging really fast. So I can kind of understand even just from a user pain perspective that version skew becomes problematic. Um, I did have one related question, which was, were there specific services within OpenStack that you found more challenging to make highly available? And for that matter, even a lot of people have different definitions of what highly available means for their deployment. And where do you draw the line between, like, is it making sure that the APIs are available continuously, or do you accept interruptions in API access, and is it just making sure that the workloads that they're managing stay running all the time? What is your definition of highly available there?
Tyler, you want to just take that?
Yeah, it's actually a really, really, really good question. Um, there are many different ways to look at highly available, and there are different designs that you can take with OpenStack that your business may be willing to accept risk of some form, where another business may not be willing to accept that risk. I think, when you look at uh, OpenStack, the regions feature, for example, is really interesting in some cases because it's so well integrated with a UI like Horizon. So somebody might want to, one business may find it, valuable to go to Horizon and have a single pane of glass, or even have a single endpoint where, their entire cloud is a federated uh, asset. However, that it kind of means that you are solely reliant on one global keystone instance. And there's been a lot of work in the space where, if you go look, a lot of people have had a lot of thoughts gone into how you operate MySQL alongside Keystone in a way that, provides that, the level of high availability or stability. But at the end of the day, it really, if you do that kind of design, you do have a single point of failure in the sense where like you are solely relying on Keystone and it's supporting services to drive your cloud. Whereas other businesses say we can't accept that risk at any point, and they have totally separate endpoints, totally separate clouds. High availability to one person may not mean high availability to another. Beyond that, is your next question, your next part of the question, I think, was about like certain parts of the control plane. We've gone through Chris, it's been 7 or 8 years since we started like the last major iteration of our design.
At
We've
least
gone
8.
through a lot of different parts of the growing pains experience. Early on, surprisingly, one of the things that caught us off guard early was actually the Nova metadata service. So when we did our last major kind of overhaul of the infrastructure, and cloud became, and OpenStack really became an important, essential critical part of the business. The number of VMs grows, and as VMs are being used, occasionally people are querying metadata. What's its host name? What availability zone is it in? All those kinds of questions. But that means though that essentially, as your number of VMs grow, so does your control plane load. And for us, it eventually got to the point where we're trying to figure out like, where is all this database load coming from? And we eventually kind of narrowed it down to the metadata service was the predominant, source of load across the cloud, just with the number of VMs increasing on it. And simply doubling the TTL of that cache gave us so much breathing room, to the point we ended up doing our own kind of internal changes to the metadata service to reduce the load on our infrastructure in a way that is not general purpose, but it worked for us, and it allowed us to scale a little more. And beyond a certain point, you can use, there are existing things in upstream OpenStack that can afford you ways to shard out load for things like the metadata service. You can use cells within a particular region to grow, Nova's control plane alongside the number of VMs and instances and things like that. I think there are CERN and other, I believe CERN uses cells. I think they've published some.
Yeah, we still use cells. Yes.
Yeah. So there's definitely use cases out there where people are leveraging that kind of functionality. One of the other challenges that we've seen as you get really, really, really big is Neutron, because Neutron does not have that equivalent functionality for, there are no cells for Neutron. Neutron is really one bigger instance that has to begin coping with the larger number of instances across your, alongside Nova. And so now we're getting to the point where we're trying to figure out like, how do we scale Neutron? So high availability and scale, it's a very fluid discussion, and it's very hard to quantify. It depends on how you end up architecting OpenStack and what choices you end up making and what risk you're willing to accept.
Another more recent example of solving HA, Tyler. So for unnamed vendor of NVMe over Fabric, they delivered a Nova driver, but it did not support HA mode. So they're like, here we go. We do OpenStack. Use this. And then we talked to them and said, well, we're not using a non-HA storage driver. Come on, like we've been HA with Ceph for a bazillion years. I mean, it's like 12 years now or something. So they thought about it, and they said, well, actually we can support it. It just might not be perfect. Or there's this. I said, well, we're only evaluating your storage technology now anyway. Give us HA, and then if we have a bug, then we will work with it. You're our partner, and we want to get a different storage backend into our product. And not necessarily unnamed vendor, but that technology looks very promising. So that was a little challenging for them because they're not just able to say, here's some software, download it, install it. They have to upstream it. So they actually have to do OpenStack the proper way, which is they need to meet with the community, get their stuff reviewed, get it merged, and only then were we willing to take it. So it was a learning process for them that although we wanted to do a relatively small engagement with their technology, they're still expected to both do open source properly and to support HA architecture, because a non-HA storage backend is an absolute non-starter for us now. Like, it's just not like, what do you mean storage is down? Like,
to them, HA meant something different. I think when we first, approached the vendor, they were new to OpenStack, and when we asked if they were HA, they were thinking like, are you providing HA enterprise storage? And they were like, yes. Of course we're providing HA storage. They just didn't associate the fact that the Cinder driver has to explicitly declare itself as highly available with regards to allocation and that kind of stuff. And it was a lost in translation exercise that, as they became more familiar with OpenStack, they were, they were able to support it.
I correct me if I'm wrong, Sally, but it's fair to say that their stuff, one of the weaknesses is when some of the associated actual storage servers are having a problem, the storage service also has a problem, right? In terms of maturity, it's a little less seamless than Ceph, where when a Ceph machine is having a problem, Ceph just kind of evicts it. And
yes, to a degree. I mean, this is one of the, I'd say maybe one of the more challenging things as you're, as we try to kind of use OpenStack as an enterprise product, and similar things with other aspects of other things in the Linux Foundation like Ceph. OpenStack is one of its utilities and powers is that it has so many features. It's so interoperable. There's so many things you can do with it, so many different ways you can bend it and shape it and use it in your infrastructure. But that inherently means that, with all of that flexibility, with all those choices, with all those options, it's hard to get total coverage on, and test confidence across so many different options. So there's always going to be bugs and issues that you have to, prepare for and help contribute back and fix as part of, what works for you.
Fungi, did that answer your question? Anyone want to sort of ask related questions to the topics that we brought up? There are other things on the agenda. Go right ahead.
That was great. That was quite thorough. Thank you.
Another thing I wanted to mention, we talked about SKU. I always want to be honest about, like the struggles we've had. So we only just retired from production, but we haven't switched off yet our Nova network-based legacy OpenStack clusters that started like more than 10 years ago. And so, of course, we did have SKU in that sense because they were a evolutionary dead end because Nova Network wasn't going anywhere, it became deprecated, and we couldn't drag those clusters over to a Neutron-based architecture in any way. So, and they still had workloads, I mean, diminishing number, but I think the last workload only got off within the past month. So, it is a problem for anybody. You do some OpenStack and you get some workloads on it. That's it. You kind of took a vow, right? You're supporting that until that's off. We're very happy to say that we're all, Caracal, OpenStack Caracal, I think, and Neutron with Calico. So we finally got that albatross off our neck. We've got other albatrosses, but that was that infrastructure predated almost every member of the team being a member of the team. So it was an increasingly difficult support burden. Okay, so
Um,
go ahead.
if I may ask, because in terms of HA and high availability of the service, at CERN we have been running the cloud for many years now, so we have plenty of recipes. That is working for us, like a lot of things relying on HA proxies, etc., etc. But just as a question for the people in the call, in case they are facing this and we are curious about it, now we are migrating to OVN, and this is something that worries us because we are moving from Linux Bridge to OVN, and one of the areas we are focusing on now is how to provide a proper available OVN setup for Neutron. So I wonder if you're already using OVN or in which networking stack are you?
So that has to be a question for the non-Bloombergers, because we haven't touched OVN ever. I can tell you what it stands for, and that's about the limit of my knowledge. I want to be very forthcoming. But please, this is again meant to be a working group. If someone even wants to say, yeah, we're new to OVN, we're looking at it, that would be like, welcome.
Because from our side, we're trying to follow as close as possible upstream recommendations. Like, you run a cluster, OVN database, you have some layers of relays that interface between the DBs and the hypervisors. But I'm curious if someone out there with more experience have faced some problems with the setups and they have tuned or refined their setup in a way that could be useful for others. Because I guess many people now with the deprecation with Linux Bridge, they will be moving to Open vSwitch, OVN, that is the recommended default upstream.
I don't know if anyone's willing to share that they even run OVN other than yourself. Someone's saying would like to participate. Just go right ahead.
Yeah, we are running OVN in our OpenStack setup, and that is just because that it was the recommended setup when we started out a couple of years ago. So far, it's been running good. I would say it's a little bit complicated to troubleshoot, but it's been running stable. We have a fairly small setup, so I couldn't speak for any HA setup with OVN, but for our single cluster with not too many machines, it's running stable. The main issue is when you're trying to debug why doesn't the traffic go the way you expect. It's very complicated to look in all the tables and trace all the traffic. But when it works, and it usually do so.
Great, thanks for the contribution, Andreas. We had special constraints from our security people that actually wanted to stop our product doing full software-defined networking and keep it as simple as possible, in the sense that no overlay network, no NCAP, DCAP. So we use Calico for a layer 3 Neutron implementation without most of the fancy SDN features. So from our point of view, OVN looks fascinating and full of toys, but I've never got to play with it.
Yeah, we are starting to embrace and adopt all these fancy features, and also discussing as well with our security team what the implications from the point of view will be for many of these things, because things are more complex than that, many things are encapsulated, etc. So everyone should have a good visibility of what's going on.
So one thing I would love to do is get more guest speakers, if you will, or guest participants. But I don't even know an OVN advanced practitioner in the OpenStack space. So if anybody does know somebody, and they could reach out to them and see if they would join for a different session where that could be a focus, because it's unknown territory for me.
I think from the experience I had in the summit in Paris, I think the people from Stack IT, they have quite some experts in the area. So I think maybe that would be a good community to maybe one month come here and discuss a little bit these topics.
Okay, I mean, I'd love to coordinate with them, invite them, try and demystify this, and so if someone could either reach out to them or give me contact info, I'll try and make that happen. So that's quite a lot on the first item on the agenda. So I guess I'll ask for any more questions, comments, observations, experience with OpenStack HA in particular.
The only thing I'll add to the OVN discussion, I'm with Chris. I don't really have experience in OVN, but more to say, like when you're talking HA OpenStack, moving from one technology to another or drastically changing how you deploy parts of your stack, it's a big lift and shift. So when you're talking about an HA deployment, when you're looking at OpenStack for an enterprise use case, be very intentional. Do scale testing. Think about how you're going to use it. See where the limits are, and size things appropriate. Design your architecture to size things appropriately. Because the last place you want to find yourself in is starting to grow into OpenStack or starting to grow into an OpenStack deployment and finding out that you're not able to scale some part of the control plane or some aspect of OpenStack alongside the needs of your business. I think my understanding of OVN is one of the big reasons it came to was because there were scaling issues with OBS as it grew into a very large control plane, which, going back to the earlier point about when Neutron gets very big, it can get hard to scale. And so you need to intentionally see where those breaking points are and for your use case, and be prepared to deal with them ahead of time, because retroactively shifting things that are in the air can be hard.
I agree with that, and that actually brings up all of the pain of the older cloud, which I won't bore people with too much, but for example, it used tagged VLANs, which are finite. It used the layer 2 span, which means that you have to have large switches and you eventually run out of ports. And the way that Nova Network worked is each tenancy had an IP subnet. So you had to decide, how many subnets do I have, which is how many tenancies you have and how big are they. So we had to have some small, some big. Lots of people got big tenancies and put 2 VMs in, and other people got small tenancies and filled them to the max. And we abolished supporting any of that, I think, literally 2 weeks ago. So, phew. Okay. Great discussion about HA. And as Tyler alluded to, we could never get to the bottom of all of it. But as previously, if people have specific questions after this, you can reach out to me on Element. Well, on Matrix, I guess. Element is the client days. We're trying to get that chat room off the ground. That seems to be something that the community thinks is okay, other than, much better than, for instance, the old sort of Twitter community, which is dead and gone. We are, again, just some people have heard this, but our project's not currently open source, but we do want to re-release it in a form we're proud of in the future, including a buildable HA version. We did have that for a while, but some bits of our stack became non-free due to vendor changes. So, but as of right now, we are open to talking about how we do things if they're interesting. But I do want to move on through the whole agenda. So OpenStack backups. I can take this question for us. We do the most obvious and stupid, annoying thing. Apologies to anyone who thinks this is great, but basically we don't provide it in the cloud, but VM owners can talk to the actual backups team, and they install a net backup client and install it, and then send their data out to the existing corporate data protection complex. And ultimately that has, I think, a staging area on disk and then giant tape robot libraries, which I think is super cool, right? But what am I contrasting that with? Well, there are continuous data protection things that plug into OpenStack and become self-service. You're like, yes, protect my data. I won't name vendors. I'm not supposed to favor vendors, but I think some of that stuff is really cool. I wanted to go there, but we already have a backups and data protection team, and we also can't afford to back up the entire cloud. I think that they wanted it to just be teams who go and talk to the data protection people and then do the normal thing. So if people would like to volunteer something maybe more interesting than that, please speak up. I'd be interested to hear other things, or you can probably talk about vendors more than we are permitted to. I don't know. That could be true. If the person who asked the question is here, I could ask them, did that answer the question? Maybe they're not here. Sometimes you have a problem that people put a question on and then they can't make the meeting. So we can't actually close the loop and make sure that they got the answer.
From an infrastructure engineering perspective, I would advise people it's probably a better option to leverage the capabilities of OpenStack and design, you know, going back to designing infrastructure intentionally. You can avoid full backups by, you know, intentionally making Cinder volumes and putting your data on those Cinder volumes and using Cinder volumes to carry your state as you need. If you use the instance in a declarative fashion. So if you correctly model your infrastructure so that you're able to just rebuild a VM separate and have the VM's configuration, the software, and everything separate from the data, you can then your backup story becomes easier because your data is separate from your operating system, configuration. You can redeploy your infrastructure, patch it, secure it, test it, stage it, all those kinds of things separate from your data. You can back up your data and manage it just through Cinder at either the block level, at either the database or file or object or whatever you want to do. So, full system backup, it may, I would probably steer people away from it unless you really, really have a need for it or, a legacy use case.
I will just argue with Tyler, which is weird, but keeping your data safe and your application working on the cloud, the way he said, is a great technique, but it's not technically backups in the sense that it's not an offline disconnected thing that would be compliant with regulators who need to hear about tape and storage and those things. We do have some of that. Mostly what people want is, I want my data to be safe, and if I have a hardware problem, I want it to be rescued, and I want my application to keep running. But actual backups, the regulators need to sometimes see that you actually have tapes on a shelf or disk replicas that are disconnected, so that, for instance, if you had ransomware loose in your network and encrypted all your apps, that you could actually recover from an earlier snapshot, that kind of thing. So we don't have a lot of interaction with that, because basically the app owners, if they need real backups, not necessarily tape, but tape-like, disconnected, immutable, they install that at the application level. And the other thing about Tyler's answer, of course, is having a Cinder volume where your precious data is kept is of course very resilient if your storage is very resilient. We run Ceph with 4 replicas, which is kind of expensive on NVMe, so that we really don't lose data if it's in a Cinder volume. We did in the past have ephemeral storage, which could go away if there was a hardware failure, but exactly the wrong set of clients used it, so we withdrew that because they actually lost data. And one of my favorite stories over a cup of coffee is the conversation where someone said, "Chris, we're friends, right? Surely you have my data in one of your secret backups." I was like, "We are friends, but I don't have secret backups. I'm very sorry. When we said your VM's going away, it went away." So, okay, so trying to move along. If that topic is done, any further comments? How do people automate their clouds? I think our answer is all Ansible all the time at core, right, Tyler? There's many other things to be said, but we used to do a mix of Chef and Ansible. Chef is going by the wayside, but we have our own take on it, not the OpenStack Ansible playbooks. They kind of were opinionated in ways that clashed with other architectural decisions that we made or had imposed on us. So we have our own, and we're not containerized. So it's kind of traditional in that sense. Anyone else want to talk about how they automate their clouds, particularly if you're running a large one?
The other thing that
sorry.
The other thing that came up with Ansible, I think when we started out using OpenStack, Ansible was a great first step tool in terms of provisioning infrastructure as code and treating infrastructure as code. I think one of the challenges we had with Ansible, as we, the size of our cloud grew, is eventually your ability to maintain your cloud. You stop being able to rely on workflows that are manually orchestrated. So even, as you have lots and lots of clouds, running a deployment across lots of them with Ansible and having complex deployment and release processes, it becomes unwieldy. So for really, really large organizations, or if you have a lot of clouds, you'll probably find eventually that it's necessary to invest in, how you actually use Ansible, how you deploy Ansible, and putting an API in front of Ansible so that you can begin kind of gathering metrics on your deployments and things like that, and treating the actual Ansible infrastructure itself as code.
I believe is it Luis was trying to get a word in. This is just go ahead.
Yeah, because from my side, I'm curious at the level of managing OpenStack, not only the infrastructure, but how people automate the, I don't know how to call it, like operations, business processes, things like how do you handle new projects, how do you handle when things go wrong and you have to evacuate machines, what sort of workflow engines do you have there? In our case, when it comes to infrastructure, we continue to use the same tools we used at the beginning, so a lot of Puppet involved. But then on top of that, when it comes to interface with our repair team in the data centers, we have, I don't know, things like run-dev jobs where we are able to delegate tasks to them so they're able to train our hypervisors, put things out of production, bring things back to production, these sort of things. And then we could be using as well things like, I don't know, Mistral workflows to also automate some other processes to make our lives as operators a bit easier. So I'm curious what people use for these sort of things beyond Ansible, or maybe Ansible as well for some things, but apart from the deployment of OpenStack itself, more like the operations on top.
It's a great question. I see Francesca has a hand up. Go ahead.
Just my 2 cents on automation. We're using Foreman for the full lifecycle management. So instead of Ansible, we're using Foreman and Puppet.
Great. Thanks for participating. Yeah, we actually do use Foreman. For us, there are layers of automation that are not critical to the core operation of the cloud, but there are things I think mentioned like evacuating hypervisors. And we do have in the cloud reliability teams that's called a lot of Airflow. The nice thing about that is it does integrate with our Ansible, but it also integrates with non-OpenStack systems within Bloomberg. So for instance, it can create tickets for a team who are the owners of a tenancy. And I think I also heard a question about how do we handle tenancies. That again is basically an integration between our OpenStack and other Bloomberg systems. So it's kind of further away from my area of expertise, but we did have to make that basically self-service. Ultimately, none of us have done, like OpenStack project create for an end user in 10 years.
So I guess it's similar to our case, because in our case, for instance, that workflows will be so many in-house plumbing between, in our case, OpenStack and ServiceNow. That, for instance, is the platform that people would use in our organization to request new projects in OpenStack and these sort of things.
I think I heard ServiceNow. Yeah, I haven't used that. Again, when you share a unique perspective on these things, if you'd like, you can drop it on the Etherpad here, because there are people who come and read it after and get answers, or at least find out what we talked about, and maybe it spikes some conversations. So basically, we've got Ansible, Airflow, Puppet, Foreman, the usual things. So any more on the automation thing? I mean, obviously it's another deep topic. And how are we doing for time? We still got time. So the last item, or last substantial item, update on Ops Radio Hour survey results. I wonder, Ildiko, would you like to take that maybe?
Yep. Yes. So there's a link on the Etherpad. I don't know if you all want me to try to share my screen and show what's in there. It is the email that I sent to OpenStack Discuss. So if anyone is subscribed to OpenStack Discuss, you probably received it already. If not, then the link itself is pointing to the archive with my summary. So we closed the Ops Radio Hour survey this Wednesday, 2 days ago. And if anyone hasn't seen it, then it was targeting to get information on where people are finding the meeting series and what time would work for folks, what cadence, and also what topics people would like to discuss. So, are you all looking at the email summary through the link, or do you all want me to try to share my screen? I don't know how that works with the recording, though. I'm not sure if I tried that before.
I mean, if you talk through it, I'm sure people can go and get the details.
Okay.
Rachel, I mean, do you have a take on the sort of like key findings?
That sounds good. So, in terms of where people are finding the meeting series, OpenStack Discuss mailing list was mentioned most frequently, almost 50% of people. And then the rest is the Scientific SIG, Slack, a workspace was mentioned. We also did, the Opening for Foundation did a direct email outreach to send out the survey links to operators. So that was mentioned. The Matrix channel was also mentioned, which I was very happy to see. And we had Reddit in the list, and then OpenStack Summit and the YouTube channel. And so we have a little mix of the main communication channels for the community, the OpenStack community, and then some other ways how people find the meeting series. We did ask whether or not the current time slot works for people. 80, almost 87% of the responses said yes, with only 13% of responses saying no. In terms of preferred cadence, biweekly and monthly are in a tie with over like what 43.5 ish%. And then weekly came up, and every 2 months came up as other answers. For preferred time slots, the current time slot is not the absolute winner. However, it is in the top three. 13, 14, and 1500 UTC got the highest votes. So my personal assumption is that respondents are likely in a bigger percentage, maybe in Europe or East Coast of North America or something along these lines. But I think every single UTC slot got some votes. And if you look at the email summary, then you will see that there is a little bump in the 0, 1, and 2 UTC, and then it goes down and it starts to come up at 800 UTC, and then it grows. It goes up, and the highest is 1400 UTC. That got the most votes, and then the curve starts to go down, and the absolute low is towards the 22 2300, and then the 3 4 500 UTC. So we have folks all around the globe who are interested in participating. 87% of people would support to run these gatherings in an alternating time slot. So this is something that we could try. And in terms of topics that people would like to cover. That was a very wide range of everything. Many people would love to hear real life experiences. What are the pain points? What are the bugs and issues, and how people got around them and got them fixed? War stories came up because people like not to feel alone with any challenges that they are facing. Automation that we just talked about today, backups and disaster recovery, and what do we do now that freezer is dead. HA also came up. Monitoring was mentioned multiple times. Documentation is also something that came up. One thing that I personally found interesting, that things like training and skills development for operators came up as a topic idea, which I don't think we explored too heavily in the past. So that is something that I found very interesting, and we could consider, the group could consider to put it on the agenda. And also getting involved and contributing to OpenStack as an operator came up, which we touched on a little bit, but I don't think we dug into it very deep. And then things like deployment methodologies, configurations, upgrades, and patching, and how to automate that and how to do that. Those are the, to me, less surprising topic mentions, because these things come up relatively often. So there are a lot of things that people would like to talk about, and this time slot is in general not a bad one to stay with, but we do have options to explore in terms of hopping around time slots a little bit, and whether we do bi-weekly or monthly, that is a question to the group to decide. But in terms of survey respondents, they would welcome either of those options. So this is roughly how the survey responses turned out, and all of this is in my summary email on OpenStack Discuss, and I will share the
I
link.
wish I could, but I can't help with emails here.
I'm sorry, my home assistant just talked. I don't know why. My HomePod. That's great, Ildiko. So I think a key limitation of doing these bi-weekly would be hosts. This might seem really self-serving, but I've done the last few. I'm willing to try bi-weekly, but I don't think I can get to weekly.
Oh, people don't want that either. It was like, maybe it was a very low percentage. Let me see. Yeah, like 9%, which was technically two people saying that weekly could be a good idea, and every 2 month was one person, which was representing 4% of the responses.
It sounds like a rough consensus that we're doing okay for now. I don't know how to see whether we should go bi-weekly experimentally. I guess we could set the next date to be roughly 2 weeks from now and see if we have involvement. I haven't actually looked at the calendar, so did you have a suggestion for the next meetup?
So, I mean, do you want, like, 2 weeks from now is, let me go back to my calendar. There we go. Is March 13th. And then if we keep the monthly cadence, that would be March 27th. I don't know if folks from this group are going to KubeCon EU, because that is that week. So if that is a concern, then we could do March 20, which is between the 2 and 4 weeks from now. So those are the options. So do you have a meeting on Friday the 13th? Is, I guess, the question for the bi-weekly cadence first.
I mean, the people who joined today should probably speak up. I think the options that Ildiko put forward are run this in 2 weeks' time, in 4 weeks' time, or split the difference. I can try and run it. The other person who has run some of these is, I think, busy today. But it's really kind of a question for the community, like how often should we try and do this?
So people on the call, are you interested and available and have topics to come and get together in 2 weeks on March 13th? Raise your hand or say yes or...
If I could speak, I would say that there doesn't seem to be a strong mandate from the people here to change anything. Would that be fair? Does anyone want to say that they disagree? So maybe we should just go monthly for now, and then I think if we started to have too much content, then we could say let's just do more meetings. So I'm seeing some thumbs up now, so maybe I'll take that as people agreeing with what I said. So is the time in 4 weeks clashing with KubeCon EU? Ildiko, is that what you said?
So it's the same week. I think the conference ends on the 26th. So if people are going to KubeCon EU, then they will likely be traveling home on Friday. But if this group is usually not attending that conference, then it doesn't really matter. But it's a bigger conference, and it's in Europe, where at least some of the folks on this call are. So it might be something that people attend. So that's why I wanted to bring it up to make sure that we are not colliding with it. If it's an issue for this group. Is anyone going to KubeCon EU from the folks around today? Seems like crickets, so might not be an issue.
So Friday the 27th seems to be unopposed, should we say? Is that accurate? Okay, so not much response from the room, which doesn't actually prove anything, but I saw one thumbs up. So March 27th, is that what you said, Ildiko?
I mean, that's technically the last Friday of March, so that would be the 4 weeks monthly cadence. Yes.
Okay, so we're running out of time, or let's say we've filled an hour, which is great. So let's put an asterisk on that and put it in the matrix chat. We're thinking this date. If people want to make Ops Radio, and that's a bad choice, we're open to moving it. Let's just see if that sparks a conversation. If not, I'll put it up at the top and put it on my calendar and plan to run another one of these in a month's time. If someone has contact info or wants to talk to an OVN practitioner about joining this as a guest speaker the way Tyler did today, so that they can get more into how their experience is, how you scale it, that would be great. But let's see if we can actually get the guest speaker. I think this is the first time we've had an official guest speaker, so I want to say thank you to Tyler. Tyler and I have worked together for years, but I asked him if he would do this, and he said yes. So he's a volunteer. So please thank him.
Sorry.
Thank
I
you.
always forget about the noise.
No, I'm glad to hear the room's kind of coming alive. I do emphasize this is meant to be a working session, not a presentation. If you gave me a score for as a presentation, I know it'd be very low. It's meant to be, we get together, we talk. So thank you, Tyler, for joining and sharing your perspective. And I'll say any other business because we've got about 2-3 minutes left. Any feedback on this session? Would someone like to say that what they learned, or was it interesting? Speak up. Or press the emoji button if that's all you're comfortable with. I actually enjoyed that.
Very interesting to slowly be more engaged with community and better understand the perspective the community is moving with. Because I am quite new to participation in the community directly.
Yeah, I would say we're new to our OpenStack journey. We're still just starting out, but I definitely find these sessions useful and very informative today around the HA stuff and all of those. So yeah, any more deep dives on that is greatly appreciated.
Okay, I love the feedback. It makes it all worthwhile. So I'll do my best to get an OVN practitioner, but I don't know any. So you're going to have to help me a little bit. I will ask other people. Maybe we can drum someone up. I think the guest speaker makes this, really great. I'm thrilled with it. So we'll try and do more of that. This was actually the sort of vision I had for it when we said Ops Radio. It was meant to be like, a host and a speaker, and then other people can kind of phone in, even though we're all actually on Jitsi. This is actually what I had in mind. So let's keep going with that. Seems to be something that people enjoy. We're an hour in, but not quite at the top of the hour. But of course, people need to grab a coffee and things. So I think maybe we should call it. Ildiko, do you agree? Should we stop the recording and say sayonara?
Yes, I think we are ready to do that. Yes.
Okay. Thanks very much, folks, and see you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, and see
Thank
you.
you. Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
Bye.